Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Samantha from UNIFORM-Agri. Welcome to our last webinar of the year. We do have another one next week, but it's about uniform goat. So this week is pretty much the last dairy webinar, I guess we could say. So today we'll be going over the dry-off analysis in the UNIFORM-Agri together. So I have a short presentation just to show you guys a couple slides, and then we'll go directly into my UNIFORM-Agri, and I'll be able to show you where to access the dry-off analysis and how it works. So there's a couple things we need to set up before we can use the dry-off analysis. So I will turn my camera off, and we will do a quick little presentation. And if you have any questions, you can just write them in the question box, and I will answer them at the end of the presentation. And if you have any other questions or you need help setting anything up after today's presentation, just give the help desk a call and we can help you out. Our phone number is 1-866-807-6111. Or you can write us an email or also a text message. So just our usual help desk information will be on your software on the bottom left-hand corner, and you can reach out to us if you have any questions. So I will hide my face, and we will I'll share my screen. So the screen, here we go. So you should be able to see my UNIFORM-Agri now. I'll pop up a little presentation. It won't take very long. So here we go. So dry-off analysis, 7th of April webinar, Easter weekend. So if you want to find the dry-off analysis, the number is 4.10. So you can write that in the top left-hand corner. You have a search bar in your program. You can write 4.10 or just dry-off analysis, and you'll be able to access these different analysis. Or you can go through the cow head on the left-hand side of your screen. With the arrow, you can go on to health and treatments. And then number 10, we have the dry-off analysis. There are 4 different sections that this analysis is split into. First being the dry-off results. The second one being the dry-off treatments and milk production. The third being dry off period, and the last is cows to dry off. You will also see cows to dry off on your dashboard, but you'll see that this one is a little more in depth on certain aspects, so we will take a look at it. And many of these reports need to have milk test results to have the somatic cell count results so that we can analyze them. Number 4 doesn't need any type of milk test necessarily, but the other ones really need the somatic cell count. So the milk control must be imported into the program. If you don't know how to do this, we can give you a hand, just give us a call, or we've had a webinar about this in the past as well. So you can also consult that in our recordings. So the first one is the dry-off results, number 1, and this overview shows over the last 12-month period the somatic cell count for each month, and it's useful to identify the newly infected cows, the cows that are considered cured, so were infected in the past, so prior to the dry-off, and we also have the problem cows, so the chronically infected is what the software calls them. And this is usually in percentage that we will see them on this report. You can modify in the properties the maximum cell count desired for first lactations and cows. So if you want to be a little more strict or a little less strict, you can go and change those in your properties. So I'll show you that once we get into the program. The second part is dry-off treatments and milk production. So this overview shows the results for different treatment plans used for dry-off. So some people will use several treatment plans. For example, if some cows have more of a higher cell count, they'll use a certain treatment plan, or some other ones, they won't even use a treatment at all, or just a sealer. So we're able to compare the different ones and see which one is more efficient. And that will also be in percentages that we'll be able to evaluate that. We can once again go into the properties and set the time frame. Usually we see the last year, but if you want to see longer or shorter, just the last 6 months, we can adjust those in the properties. Number 3, we have dry off period. So this is an overview that shows your results for each cow on the desired dry off period, and this will be in days. So right now in my program, it's set to 50 days. You might do longer, shorter periods for your dry off. So we'll be able to identify if the cows are dried off in that desired period. And it just helps visualize kind of the results for a specific time period. We can change the number of days desired for the dry off period through the properties once again. Lastly, we have the cows to dry off, which is this number 4. It's a grid that shows the cows to be dried off for the next X number of days. So these number of days can be set in the properties. By default, it'll show you the next 30 days, but we can adjust that. It's kind of the same list that you'll have on your dashboard, but you might have a little bit more information about somatic cell count prior to dry off and after dry off and whatnot. So you'll also have a suggested treatment plan to be used depending on the mastitis events or also the somatic cell count. So that is the wrap for the little presentation. Now what we will do is we will go into my UNIFORM-Agri and I'll just show you a couple things that need to be done prior to using the dry off analysis. So first thing is first, we're going to have to go to program settings, into the general settings. This is usually something that is done during your first web training when you install the program. If you don't remember, if it already has been done, or if you want to make changes, just give us a call and we'll be able to help you out. So it takes a couple minutes to load, but when this screen comes up, we just have to click on dry off right here. So we can see that my first calvers, so my heifers, as well as my cows, are dried off 50 days prior to the expected calving date. You can adjust this as well, depending on what you would like. And then right here, just below, I have dry off treatment. So I can choose no default. If you don't want to put anything by default, you can choose that. It does require a little more manual process when doing data entry. So that's why usually we'll select default treatments at dry off based on the current lactation results. So A is no mastitis, no high cell count, so just a healthy cow. We will just put dry off by default. If she's had at least one mastitis during lactation, you can put just the normal dry off as well. Or if you have a different type of treatment plan that you want to use for this, we can go and choose it from our list. And the last one, C, is at least one high cell count in the last 3 milk recordings before the dry off. In this case, what I've chosen is my dry off plus mycotil. So this is a medicine that I will use for my animals that have a higher infection rate. You also have another one below here that you can set default treatments at dry off based on guidelines. So either it's mostly cell count. So you'll be able to do first lactation in cows, or between certain cell counts, you can choose which treatment you want. Once this is established, you can just push on OK. It'll save everything. And what I will do now before going and analyzing our results is I'd like to take 2 cows and show you guys the difference between the two. So I'll do a data entry. I have cow number 356 that I need to dry off. So I will put her number, 356. I will put in here action dry off, and I'm going to dry her off a bit early. I think she was due next week to be dried off, but I will dry her off today. And in my treatment, by default, it just chooses dry off here. So I can assume that this cow has had very low somatic cell count, or she has not had very many mastitis events either. And that's why it's not choosing the dry off plus mycotil. It's only giving me dry off as a treatment. If ever I did want to give her the dry off plus mycotil, I can just open my treatment list and choose here dry off plus mycotil. But if not, I will just keep dry off chosen in this case. And when we do next, this is where I want to show you the treatment plans. You can have your dry off treatment, or I have another one called dry, no antibiotics, plus Orbiseal. So that means that it's only the sealer, and these can be made in your treatment plans, which I'll go to in a couple minutes and show you that you can have different treatment plans for the different treatments. In this case, I'm just going to choose dry off with the antibiotics. So when I do next, I can see that I have my Cepha-Dry, Orbiseal, and my top back vaccine that I give at dry off. And then I can click finish, and it will show me my withdrawal periods for milk and beef. So 356 is dried off. I have one more cow, 154, that I want to dry off. So I'll do the same thing, action, dry off. I'll do that today. And in the treatment, when I open it up, here we can see that it's offering the dry off plus mycotil. So this means that this cow is obviously high somatic cell count because it's automatically putting the mycotil for her. If you decide that you don't want to use this treatment, once again, you can just open up this window here and choose the regular dry off from your list. I will leave dry off plus mycotil just to show you that when we click on next, in the treatment plans, I do not have my no antibiotics or just a sealer or whatnot, because the treatment dry off plus mycotil is only linked to the treatment plan called dry off plus mycotil. So that's the one I have to choose. I can click on next, and I will have all my medicines here. My 4 medicines appear with everything is entered by default because these can be created in your treatment plan. I can click on finish. I have my withdrawal periods once again for milk and beef. And there we go, my 2 cows are dried off. So where do I create these treatment plans? I have to go under the cow head, herd data. In the action scheduler, number 1 is treatment plan. So I have quite a few treatment plans already created here. I'll put them in alphabetical order to show you my top 3. So I have the first one that's called dry, no antibiotics, plus Orbiseal. So if I click on the little plus, it shows me that I have my vaccine and only my Orbiseal. I also have dry off, that is with Cepha-Dry, Orbiseal, and top back. And we can see here that the treatment that it's linked to is the dry off only. So that's why earlier when I was entering the dry off plus mycotil, it wasn't offering these 2 treatment plans, and that's why. It was only offering the third one, which is dry off plus mycotil, which I can see here, the treatment it's linked to is dry off and mycotil. So this is why it's important to identify these before going into the dry off analysis, because the dry off analysis only considers these treatment plans that are used when drying off an animal. So now that we've gone over this, we can go to the dry off analysis by going into the search bar. I can put 4.10 and I'll have my different dry off analysis and reports. Or I can access them by going on the cow head in health and treatments. And I will go to number 10, which is dry off analysis. Here are my 4 different reports that I'm going to look at. I'll go in order, so I'll go with number 1, which is dry off results. They take a couple minutes to load since there's quite a few animals in my herd. So this is a nice bar graph that will show you on the horizontal axis is my milk test dates. So this is my milk test for approximately the last year that are going to show up here. You can go in the properties and adjust the time frame. If you only want to see 6 months, you can adjust that, or if you want to see longer, you can also adjust that. So for each milk test, it will show you how many animals have been evaluated for that milk test. And it's not because, for example, the 25th of February, I have 20 animals on that milk test. And it's not because I only tested 20 animals, it's because I had 20 fresh cows. So it's only the fresh cows that are going to be analyzed because they have had a dry off, and we want to see how the dry off has affected their cell count. So that's why I have 20 here. Of those 20 animals, I have 85 in white. And if we look over here at the legend, it says in white, it's my healthy animals. So they were healthy before and they're still healthy. That's why they're in white. And usually that's why we have we want a higher percentage of healthy cows in general. After, we have 5% in green, which means they're cured. So this is because before the dry off, they were probably pretty high in somatic cell count, and now after the dry off, they've gone down, so they're considered cured. You also have in purple the chronicle ones, which means they're chronically infected, which means that before the dry off, they were high somatic cell count, and there's still high somatic cell count after the dry off. And then lastly, we have in red what's called the new infections. So we have another 5% of new infections, which means prior to dry off, they were low. And since they've calved, they're high somatic cell count. So this can be demonstrated on all the last milk tests, and you can evaluate if you're doing better or doing worse, or what's going on. If you feel like you have a lot of cows that are coming back high, well, this can really go and confirm those thoughts. You can choose if you want to see all lactations at the top right-hand corner, or we can choose second lactation only, and it'll show them on the bar graph, or third plus lactation. So you can choose who you want to evaluate specifically, so you can target a little more where the problems are. If we go in the properties here, one thing I wanted to show you that's really important to establish at the very beginning is your max somatic cell count for the cows. So we can click on edit in the middle here of the properties, and we have the max SCC for first lactation. So that's your heifers that are calving out for the first time, and then your somatic cell for the cows, second lactation, and more. So if you want to be stricter or you want to give them a little loose, you can just adjust it here. So for example, my second lactation and plus, if I want to be a little more strict, I can put 200 instead of 250, and then it'll adjust all my graphs that are related to the cell count. After that, you can push on OK, and it's really important to click here on the Save Settings before clicking on OK. So once those changes are made, you will see that your graph here will adjust. For most of these analysis, you will have a graph and a grid. So we can always up here go on grid, and it'll also show the same results as in the graph, but it's just a little more of a, I guess, a little less visual, I guess we could say, but you have more details. So for example, my milk recording from the 29th of March, it'll tell me how many cows are healthy, what percentage that is, as well as cured, chronically infected, and newly infected. If I want to see, for example, which cows, I have 2 cows here that are newly infected after calving, I can click on the little blue eye, and it'll tell me that it's my cow number 193 and 232 that are newly infected. And the value here is their somatic cell count. So they're at 314,000 and 309,000. And then that shows you that these 2 cows represent 18% of the fresh cows at that milk control. So that sums it up for the dry off results. If we go back to dry off analysis, we're going to take a look at a pretty interesting analysis, which is called dry off treatment and milk production. So this is where it comes in handy to have those different dry off treatment plans, because we're going to be able to analyze them and see which one is more efficient. So our first one here in the bar graph is the Orbisil and Topvac, which is our vaccine. We have that in every one of them. So this one is just a sealer. And we can see that there's 146 animals that received this treatment plan. And this is in the last year. So in the properties on the bottom right-hand corner, you can set the start date and the end date to evaluate a specific time frame. You can also include animals without a treatment or include heifers, so first calvers on this graph, but it will not be very representative of your different treatment plans because they didn't receive one. So you can add them if you like and then click on Save Settings, but for now I just want to evaluate the ones that did receive a treatment. So 88% of the ones that got this first treatment plan are healthy, or were healthy and still are. 2 are cured, so were high somatic cell count prior to dry off and now are low. And then we have a 10% that were low before and they come back after calving with a pretty high somatic cell count. So overall, not too bad. After, we have 43 animals in the second treatment plan, which is Cephadry, Mycosil, Orbisil, Topvac. So this is the one with the 4 medicines, and we can see that there was 30% that were healthy prior and that are still healthy after. And then the one that's important to look at, I guess you could say, or that we want to see, is the 58% in green that are cured. So this means that prior to dry off, they were pretty high cell count, and now they're coming back after receiving this treatment plan and are cured, so are low. So that's really encouraging in the sense that that means that this treatment plan is working really well. Now, the last one is the Orbisil Topvac with the antibiotics. So there's no Mycosil for this one. It's just the simple antibiotics. And we can see 61% were healthy, 22 come back cured, but we just have a couple here, 13% of newly infected and 4 of chronically infected. This is the same idea in the sense that on the right-hand side, we can choose if we want to see only the second lactation, third plus. We can choose to see treatment only, so we'll only have 2 different treatments, the one that's called dry off and the other one that's called dry off plus Mycotil. But I wanted to compare the different medicines used because I really wanted to differentiate all of them. In the next tab here, we have milk production and somatic cell count. So this one's a little more complete in the sense that it will show you the average milk yield before dry off. So it's in 10%. So we have 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and so on. It shows you how many animals are in that average milk yield. And it'll also say what the average milk yield is at the top. And then you'll have the bars with the lines through them are the previous before dry off, and the ones without the lines through them are after the calving. So we can see which ones were chronicle before, which ones were chronicle after, and how much percentage that is, how many newly infected, and so on. Lastly, we have the dry off results tab. So this will show you each cow. So for example, we have cow number 1 here that we can see her lactation number. We have 3 columns for SDC. We have -1, -2, -3. This is because it's the 3 last milk recordings that were imported into the program. It will show you, for example, we can see she's newly infected at the last one, but the 2 prior to that were decent. You'll also have her milk production, dry off date, and which medicine was used. So we can see if it's only the sealer, if it's the Mycotil, if we have the antibiotics, and so on. And then we'll have the calving date, and +1, +2, +3 is the tests that were imported after that calving date. So then we can see before and after. So we can see that this one was cured, had another low test, but now is back up newly infected. So that sums it up for the dry off treatments and milk production. We'll go into number 3, which is dry off period. So this one's a little different. Instead of having averages and whatnot, you're going to see each individual cow as a little square on a graph. So here it is. We have a green line across horizontally, and this is your desired dry off period. So if we go into the properties, we can set the number of days here in the desired period. So mine is 50, give or take 7 days. And that was already established in my general settings. So you might have more, you might have less. So if you want to adjust it, you can, and click Save Settings. After this, we have each little square that's a cow. So if you put your mouse over each little square, you'll see at the top right-hand corner, you'll have the animal data. So which cow is it, lactation number, and so on. This just kind of gives us an overview to see, okay, are most of our cows dried off for the number of days that is desired, or if they're kind of scattered, are too scattered for your liking, you can see that maybe you need to work a little bit on the dry off period. And the colors are the same. Green means that she was cured, so her somatic cell count went down after dry off. The red is because they were newly infected, and your purple ones are your problem cows usually. If I go into the grid section, I will have all my cows individually with a dry off date, expected days of dry period, and the realized. So how many days was she supposed to be dry, expected, and how many was she actually? And then the last 3 columns are your 3 tests after her calving. So then we can see her cell count after calving. Lastly, we have, if we go back to dry off analysis, we have cows to dry off. This is similar to the list you'll have on your dashboard that's called to dry off, but you'll have a little more information in the sense that the somatic cell counts for the last 3 tests will show up here. So for example, if I take my number 214, she is to be dried off the 10th of April. And I can see that she is chronically infected at each test. So my expected dry off treatment will be dry off plus mycotil because that's the one I have for my problem cows. You'll also notice some of them have little red lines between each test. This is for the mastitis events. So that means, for example, Marley over here, number 156, she seems to be quite a problem cow because she's always pretty high in her somatic cell count, and she's got these red lines, which means she has mastitis events quite often. So of course, it's going to offer me to dry her off with mycotil as well. So then that kind of gives you an idea a little bit if you only want to dry a certain number of cows off with the mycotil, you can come here and see who should be more prioritized for this kind of treatment. In the properties, you can set the number of days you want to see. So right now I'm only seeing the next month. If you only want to see the next 2 weeks, or if you want to see 2 months, you can put in the number of days and push on OK, and then you'll see more or less depending what you've set in the properties. If you have any questions regarding these reports, don't hesitate to reach out to us. That pretty much sums up the dry off analysis for today. Like I said earlier, this is our last webinar for the dairy herds, but if you'd like to join in next week and you're curious about the Uniform Goat program and what the differences are, you can also sign up for that one. If not, this will be recorded, or it was recorded, I should say, so you'll be able to access it afterwards. You should receive an email with it, and if not, it will be available on our website later. So if you have any questions, you want to set up something differently in your program, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you. Our support phone number is 1-866-807-6111, or you can also send us a text message at that number or an email on our support team's email address. That being said, have a great Easter and a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.